Hello and welcome to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I am here today to do a book haul revisit for the month of October. If you're unfamiliar, book haul revisits are where I look back at book hauls from this month in past years. I have 6 October book hauls that we're going to look at here today. And I want to see how many of the books that I brought into my library I have read. It's a way of holding myself accountable for the books that I purchase as someone who clearly has a big book, pretty serious book addiction. So it's a way of accountability. And I hope it also has made me a bit of a more intentional book purchaser. You know, I've learned things about myself as a reader and as someone who buys a lot of books during this process. But since we have 6 years of book hauls to look at, I wanted to streamline the process of it. So here's your sort of boilerplate before we get started on the actual book haul revisit. For the sake of timing, to keep this from being an incredibly long video, because without these, it would be an incredibly long video, trust me. I've removed any books that were purchased for my Pulitzer Prize project. And that actually comes into play because this is actually the second time I have started to film this video. I got about 5 minutes in, and when I realized that Louise Erdrich's The Mighty Red fits 2 of my criteria for removing books from a book haul revisit. First, it's part of my Pulitzer Project because Louise Erdrich won a Pulitzer Prize. She is a Pulitzer author. Josephine Johnson, same thing. I bought 2 copies of Josephine Johnson books at Powell's last year. She's a Pulitzer author, so she's part of that project. So things that don't qualify for our purposes here today. So I have had to restart because I redid the numbers and removed The Mighty Red from my book haul revisit. I've also removed books that were gifted to me and library builders, which are cases where I purchased a book to complete an author collection. Louise Erdrich also fits that, and so does Josephine Johnson, because I have purchased every book that Louise Erdrich has published at this point, and I'm sort of working my way to do a lot of the same with Josephine Johnson. Maybe not every book, but a bunch of them. So I've also removed books that I had already read at the time I purchased them, because what that means is I liked the book enough that I knew I wanted a copy on my shelf. So really, I'm only including books that I purchased for myself with the intention or hope of reading that book sometime soon. That's it. Again, nothing that's gifted. And when I say gifted, nothing that was given to me by a friend or a relative or a subscriber, and also nothing that was sent to me by a publisher, because it just doesn't meet that criteria of something that I spent money on for myself. The accountability comes in when I start to spend money. That's the way it goes. So we are going to start with the most recent book haul, which is October of 2024, and work our way back in time to October of 2019. I am not going to spend a lot of time talking about what these books are about. Again, that's just in the interest of time. If you want to know more about a book, I will have the links to the original book haul videos in the description box down below. You can go there, watch the video. I'll talk about what the book is about. I usually read a bit from the opening of the book. You can get all of that. I am also going to have links to all of these books on bookshop.org in the description box down below. If you want more information about a book, you can also go there. If you want to purchase it, you can go there, or you can go to your local independent bookstore or support your local library. Okay, we're ready. Let's jump in and start with October of 2024. As I said, this is an interesting book haul to look back at because at the time, October of 2024 was my largest ever book haul. I have since surpassed this number, I believe twice. But at the time, it was my largest book haul. But the reason it was my largest book haul was that Joel and I went to a book conference in Portland at the end of September and beginning of October. So I had a lot of books that I brought home with me, but a lot of them were gifted to me by publishers. So once I went through and removed books that didn't meet our criteria, I was left with 5. And that's it. So out of the large number, ignore my calendar, by the way, out of that large number of books, there are only 5 that actually qualify for our purposes today and that I actually spent money on for myself. So let's start talking about them. The first 2 are books that I bought at Powell's. We bought more books at Powell's, but a lot of them were books that I had already read and wanted copies of, or Josephine Johnson or Louise Erdrich. But while we were there, I had wanted a copy of Salam Lek by Khaled Al-Ismail, translated by Larry Price, for a long time, and I hadn't been able to find it. But I had a suspicion that they would have it at Powell's, and they did. So I purchased a copy, and I read this last year, and I really enjoyed it. So I would recommend this book to you. And Joel read it and really liked it as well. So we open with a success story, and I always love it when we get to open with a success story. So boom, we start with a win. Also at Powell's, I got the Love of Singular Men by Victor Herringer. This is also a translated book, but it doesn't say the translator on the cover. It's translated from the Portuguese by James Young. This one I have not read, but it's actually the same thing. I had heard about this book and I wasn't running into it in any of the bookstores near me, but I had a suspicion that Powell's would have it, and sure enough, they did. So it's a tiny little thing, and it has been in the mix a bunch of times. I'm a mood reader. If you're unfamiliar, basically a lot of the time when I finish one book, I don't necessarily know what I'm in the mood to read, so I will end up pulling maybe 2 to 5 books off of my shelf, and The Love of Singular Men has been in that mix. And it was also on my pile of possibilities for Pride Month, and it was on my pile of possibilities for Shorty September, so I feel like it's only a matter of time before I actually get to this book. Hopefully that will bear out and become true in future book haul revisits. Then I got a copy of Long Island by Colm Tóibín. I have not read this one yet, but I haven't read this one because I was holding off. I wanted to read Blackwater Lightship by Colm Tóibín first, because I just kind of decided in my head I wanted that book to be the first Colm Tóibín book that I read. And it was. I finally read that book in June. The other barrier for entry is that this is a sequel to Brooklyn, and I need to read Brooklyn first. So this one is sort of a down the line book purchase. I knew I would want to get to it. I just had things I wanted to do first. One of those hurdles is done. I have one left, and hopefully I will be reading Brooklyn soon. Then, The Snow Child. I got myself a copy of this because Awen Ivy was actually at that book conference that Joel and I attended in September and October of last year. And I got a copy of, an advanced reader's copy of Blackwood's Blue Sky, which came out in February of 2025, I believe. And because it was gifted, doesn't count here. But what I really wanted to do was go back and read The Snow Child. So I got a copy, and I ended up listening to it on audio, but I did read it, and I absolutely loved it. And I loved Blackwood's Blue Sky. Awen Ivy has become a big author for me. There's only one book of hers left that I have not read, but I read this, and I absolutely loved it. All right, the final book from my October of 2024 book haul is Happy All the Time by Laurie Colwin. At this point, I've accumulated 3 or 4 Laurie Colwin books, and I haven't read any of them yet, but I'm really interested in reading her, and I haven't decided which book I want to do first. I think Happy All the Time came very highly recommended, so it will probably be the one that I do first, although I might be distracted by home cooking because that sounds fun. So I haven't read it yet, but I still very much want to, and that's true of all 3 of the books that I haven't read in this book haul. I haven't gotten to them yet, but I still very much want to. There's still a sense of urgency and desire to get to them, which is good. That means that hopefully, as time goes on, I will have done a good job in my October of 2024 book haul. So, of the 5 books that I brought into my library 1 year ago, I've read 2, which is 40% of the overall book haul. And you know, I kind of aim for about 50% or more, but we're getting there. And a lot of the time I haven't read many of the books 1 year out. So hopefully by the time we get 2 years out, 3 years out, I feel like this is one that I could eventually be 100% on. And we just have to wait until we get to that point. Now, the other criteria I'm watching out for are the amount of books that I unhaul. Ultimately, I don't really mind unhauling. It's sort of a natural process of having a book addiction because you get a lot of books and sometimes you need to make room for other books. I haven't unhauled any of these. My big watch out criteria is books that I end up unhauling without reading, because sometimes that means I was a little over enthusiastic and didn't really think about whether or not I was actually going to read something, or, you know, it's not that I made a mistake, but it's the criteria that I want to be careful of. And because I haven't unhauled any of the books from 2024 yet, I'm not making any progress toward hitting my watch out criteria here. I am also keeping track of how many of the books I listen to on audio. Personally, I don't mind if I listen to a book on audio if I have spent money on the book, because the way I listen to audiobooks is either on Libby, which is a library app, so I don't spend money on it, or Libro, which, yes, is a monthly service that we pay for, but you get a credit every month, so it doesn't feel like I'm spending money on it. And I don't mind using a credit on an audiobook if it helps me read it. We also got Kobo Plus. I have not done anything on Kobo Plus yet, but Joel has. So that will be another option. So again, it's a monthly service though. So I don't feel bad if I end up listening to a book on audio. I do think it's an interesting criteria to watch over time though. And I listened to one of these books on audio. That was The Snow Child. So that is 20% of my October of 2024 book haul. Okay, let's move back to October of 2023, which is a really great book haul. Lots of fantastic books to talk about. Chief among them were, well, the first two. Actually, a lot of the ones that I've read have been books that I really loved. The Heaven and Earth Grocery Store by James McBride. Great book. I think maybe should have won the Pulitzer Prize for that year. Such a shame that it didn't, but big success story. Great book. So glad that I got it. So glad that I read it. And after that, I knew I was going to end up listening to Of Time and Turtles by Cy Montgomery, illustrated by Matt Patterson, on audio. I knew it. At this point, I had already learned that I tend to listen to nonfiction books on audio more than I will actually sit down and read them. But when I saw this in the store, it was just such a beautiful book. And it has great illustrations inside. I knew that I wanted to own a copy for my shelf. So I got it. I did read it on audio, and I love this book. And just in September, Joel and I were able to get it signed by Cy Montgomery and Matt Patterson because they were promoting a new children's book that they did. And we got it signed. So I'm so happy that this is here in my library, and it's one of my favorite nonfiction books of all time. Probably one of my favorite books of all time, honestly. I also really loved the next book, which is Loved and Missed by Susie Boyne. I'm not someone who usually tabs books, but I tabbed this book multiple times, and that lets you know that I read it and I really loved it. It would be a difficult subject matter for some readers because of the topics involved. So maybe check out the description of this book either on bookshop.org or watch the original book haul for this video to see if it would be good for you. But I really enjoyed this book, and I sort of feel like I wish more people would read it and discover it. Then we come to my first unhaul from this book haul revisit video that we're doing right now. In the form of a question, The Joys and Rewards of a Curious Life by Amy Schneider. Joel and I actually watched Amy Schneider's entire run on Jeopardy! We have since become patchy with how much we watch Jeopardy! But at the time, we watched every single day. And we were watching when Amy Schneider had her first episode. We were watching when she had her last episode. So we got to see the entire run. And therefore, I was very curious to read her book and didn't like it all that much. So pretty quickly ended up unhauling it and getting it out of my library. But I did read it first, so we're not hitting my watch out criteria with that one. Then, Roman Stories by Jhumpa Lahiri. Did I mention that there are a lot of really great books in October of 2023? Obviously, In the Form of a Question was a miss, but I really love Roman Stories. I really love Jhumpa Lahiri. I did read this book. It's absolutely fantastic. I even love these trees. We saw a lot of them when Joel and I were in Italy, and we immediately fell in love with them. So, really great book. Next is Love and Summer by William Trevor. I got this one and the next one when I was starting to think about our trip to Ireland and Scotland and think about Irish authors that I wanted to read. And I ended up reading a different book by William Trevor first, a collection of short stories. And I've held on to this one because I did like that collection of short stories, and we'll hopefully be getting to it eventually, but I have not read this one yet. Then, as I said, I was trying to read some Irish authors before we went to Ireland. And I got this trilogy of books collected into one. It's the Barrytown trilogy by Roddy Doyle. I had been hoping that I would at least read The Commitments before I went to Ireland. Didn't manage it, but I would still like to get around to reading this trilogy. I've heard so many good things about it. So hopefully I will be getting around to it someday. All right, so there were 7 books that I brought into my library in October of 2023. I've read 5. I'm going to give myself a little pat on the back for that one. That's 71% of my October 2023 book haul. And looking at the books that I haven't read, this is another one where I think in a couple of years, this will probably be at 100% because I still really want to read the Barrytown trilogy. I want to read Love and Summer, and those are the only 2 that I haven't read. So we could definitely get to 100% with this one as well. I did unhaul one book, which is 14% of the book haul, but I had read it first, so we don't hit my watch out criteria. I did end up listening to 2 of the books on audio, which is 29% of the overall book haul. But again, I don't particularly mind if I end up listening to a book on audio. Let's go to October of 2022. The first book I brought into my library was The Sheep Queen by Thomas Savage. I had read The Power of the Dog and absolutely loved it, and I wanted to read something else by him, so I got a copy of this book, and I read it, and I did enjoy it. I now have a 3rd book by Thomas Savage that I have not read yet, but definitely an author that I am looking to read more of as time goes on. Then there was La Bastarda by Trifonia Melibea Obono, translated by Lawrence Schimel. In 2022, I was doing an LGBTQ+ in translation read-along with Jen the Librarian, and this was the selection for October. I did read it, and I liked it. I didn't love it. It's a very tiny book, and it felt like it didn't pack as much of a punch as I wanted. So ultimately, I did unhaul it, but I read it first and was able to discuss with the group that was following along with that read-along. Then, a big one, a very big one, Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. Big in size, but also in anticipation from me in terms of the amount that I love Barbara Kingsolver. And I did read this book. I absolutely loved it. I was thrilled when it ended up co-winning the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. And such a good book. I cannot say enough good things about it. Then there was Liberation Day by George Saunders. I'm on a bit of a roller coaster with him. I wasn't such a fan of the 10th of December, but I did end up liking Lincoln in the Bardo. Ultimately, I haven't read this one yet, so maybe I'll get around to it. It is a signed edition, but I have not read it right now. So that's 4 books that I brought into my library in October of 2022, and I've read 3. Pat on the back again. That's 75%. I've unhauled 1, which is 25% of that book haul. But again, I had read it, so I don't hit my watch out criteria. And I actually did not listen to any of the books that I ended up reading on audio. So nothing to tally up in regard to that. Let's go back to October of 2021. There are a good amount of books that I brought into my library then. And actually, let's jump back to October of 2022 for a moment, because there's only 1 book that I haven't read, and it's Liberation Day. I do have a bit of a question mark about whether or not I will ever get around to reading that one. I think a lot will be told, because George Saunders has a new book coming out next year, Vigil, which is actually a tie-in to Lincoln in the Bardo. I feel like I could end up reading that one first, and that will sort of be the tell about if I like it, then I will probably go back and read Liberation Day. If I end up not liking it, I might say goodbye to it. So this could be a book haul that I end up getting 100% on, but there's a question mark attached to that. So anyway, October of 2021. The first book, Aristotle and Dante Dive into the Waters of the World. I knew that I was going to end up listening to this on audio because Lin-Manuel Miranda reads the audiobooks of this and the first book in the series, which is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. And I knew I was going to go that way, but I loved Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe so much that I just knew that I was going to want to have a copy. So I bought it first, and I did read it, and it was just as good as I was expecting it to be. It was one of my favorite books from that year. And as I am now picking up a copy of Harlem Shuffle by Colson Whitehead, I'm realizing that this was actually... No, never mind. I thought it was sent to me by a publisher, but it's a Book of the Month book. I used to be a member of Book of the Month. I was sent a different Colson Whitehead book by the publisher. So ignore that. Anyway, Harlem Shuffle is next. I have not read it. I do still want to, but I admit the urgency has quieted down a bit. I do still kind of want to read it. So I don't know when, but someday I'm hoping to be there. Now, I had previously, I can't remember if I had called this book an unhaul last year. I had been thinking about getting rid of Please Don't Sit on My Bed in Your Outside Clothes by Phoebe Robinson, but it was still in the house because when I took it to my local used bookstore, sometimes if they don't want something right now, but they might in the future, they'll call it a try again. So it was a try again. So it's been sitting in, I have a pile of try agains that are waiting to go back. And recently I took the pile of try agains back in and they went through and rendered a final decision on this one. They don't want it. But as I was thinking about it, I was like, I would actually still read that. I do still like Phoebe Robinson. I do still like her publishing imprint. And I'm actually not really in a crush for space in my nonfiction section. So I made the decision to put it back on my shelf. So this is the rare book that may have been unhauled in the past and is back. And it's the same copy that I had purchased in the first place. So I haven't read it, but that pile of books I'm making right here is starting to get a little tall. So I'm going to just move that off and we're going to avoid a big disaster. All right. Then Monster in the Middle by Tiffany Unique. The urgency to read this one has pretty well died. And from that, you can probably guess I haven't read it yet. And I was really excited about this book when it came out. But the thing is, I don't know anyone who has read this book. And because nobody talks about it, because I don't really get any good feedback on it, as I said, the urgency has kind of died. But I'm not crushed for space at the end of the alphabet where this is shelved. So I'll probably hold on to it. But it's been 4 years at this point. If I have still not read this next year, I might really start thinking about how realistic it is that I will get around to reading it. But I'm not at that point right now. So we'll see what happens in a year. And that's between that and the lack of urgency to get to Harlem Shuffle, this is going to be a tough one to get 100% on. But that's okay. You don't win everything. All right, the next one is A Dutiful Boy, a memoir of secrets, lies, and family love by Mohsin Zaidi. I believe Jen the Librarian had read this and made me really interested in reading it, and I just haven't managed to get around to it at some point. But it has this nice yellow cover, so I see it on my nonfiction shelf all the time and think, oh, I really want to read that. So hopefully one of those times it will be timed to me being able to get around to it. We just need to wait and see. I don't plan to get rid of it. Then there was Sankofa by Chibundu Onozi and Onuzo. Sorry, let me try that again. Chibundu Onuzo. Ultimately, the urgency kind of died to read it. And although people did sometimes recommend it to me, I started to think, well, I do have access to the audio. This was back when I used to be a member of Everand, and I'm not anymore because I got very upset with a lot of things about Everand. We don't have to get into it here. So I don't actually have access to the audio anymore, but I had been thinking to myself, well, I'm much more likely to listen to this on audio, so why am I holding onto the physical copy? So I got rid of it. We do hit my watch out criteria there. For the first time in this book I'll revisit, we hit my watch out criteria. The final book from this book haul that we're talking about is The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. I have not read this one yet, and this is in a very similar situation to Combe to Bean. I feel like I want to read The Gentleman of Moscow first, and then I will try to get to this one. And part of me is frustrated because the hardcovers of his books take up a lot of space on my bookshelves. But I hear so many good things about his work that I'm kind of thinking once I start to read them, I might be grateful that I have hardcovers. But I admit, part of me would love to trade in. I have A Gentleman in Moscow, I have The Lincoln Highway, and I thought I had one other. Maybe that's it. But part of me would love to take both of them, get rid of the hardcovers, and take home the paperbacks and just do a little bit of a swap. But I want to read one before I make a decision about that. So I haven't read it yet, but someday. All right, so that's 7 books that I brought into my library in October of 2021. I've only read one, which is not great, and that means that I've read 14% of this book haul. So there's a lot of work to be done. This one does feel like it'll be a probably unreachable feat to get 100%. There's just a lot of work to be done, and the urgency to get to some of them has pretty well died. I have unhauled one, which is 14%, and that does meet my watch out criteria. So again, that's 1 out of 7, which is 14%. My first tally toward my unhauled books that I unhauled without reading. And the one book that I ended up reading, I also listened to on audio, so we hit that criteria as well. But ultimately, as I said, it doesn't matter to me if I listen to something on audio. So let's go back to October of 2020. First book that I brought into my library was Love by Toni Morrison. This is actually not the edition that I brought in at that time. Toni Morrison is an author that I really love. So although this is not my favorite of her books, I kind of want to have hardcovers of all of her books. So when I saw this in a used bookstore, I picked it up and swapped the paperback that I had for the hardcover. So I have read this one, and I just love Toni Morrison. The next one is my beloved The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Filyard. This had been on the long list for the National Book Award for Fiction at the time, and I really wanted to read it. So I made sure I got myself a copy of it, and I love this book. I love this book so much. Even if you are not someone who's into short stories, this would be a great book for you. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. The next two were less successful. Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I read it. It kind of annoyed me, so I got rid of it. And I have been hesitant about Rumaan Alam released another book, I think it was last year, and I feel like it would take a lot to get me to try another one of his books. Then there was Whatever Happened to Interracial Love by Kathleen Collins, which was a very interesting book. It's a short story collection. It's a very short story collection. But I thought it was interesting. I didn't like it enough to feel like I had to hold on to it, so I did trade it in. But I read it. So I've read 4 out of 4 of this book haul. That's great. Pat on the back. I got 100%. 100% for the first time in October, when there's so many of these book hauls have been close to that mark, but not quite there. This one actually got there. So 3 cheers for that. I unhauled 2 of those books, which is 50% of the overall book haul from October of 2020. But I had read both of those books first, so I get a 0 for my watch out criteria, and I did not listen to any of the 4 books on audio, so that's also a big 0. All right, let's move to the final book haul that we're going to talk about today, October of 2019. And this one is going to be a bloodbath. But the first book was Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. And this is interesting because when I started collecting the books to film this video that I'm filming right now, I picked up Rebecca and was thinking, I am kind of in a spooky reading mood, and this is like my version of a spooky book. So I might actually read this next. I'm not going to count it as something that I'm reading because I haven't even fully decided if I will, but this might fit my mood for right now. So I might end up reading this, which would be good for my numbers next year, but that's not the impetus. I'm in a mood for sort of spooky October books, and Rebecca feels like it hits that for me. So that would be why. It's just lucky that I was doing this and picked it up. So now we get into a bunch of books that I unhauled, including Nothing to See Here by Kevin Wilson. I ended up having early access to a galley of Kevin Wilson's next book, which is Now is Not the Time to Panic. Didn't like it. So I felt like I should let Nothing to See Here go. I have since gotten so much good feedback about Nothing to See Here that part of me is thinking, well, maybe I should read that one. But I think what I would do is try it on audio and see what happens from there. But there's still a bit of reluctance to do that one since I wasn't a very big fan of Now is Not the Time to Panic. The Water Dancer by Ta-Nehisi Coates. I was really excited about it at the time, got very mixed feedback about the book. And then over time, I felt like the urgency to read it just flatlined. And ultimately, I really needed space in the seas. So I decided to let it go. Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. That was a book of the month book. as actually was The Water Dancer. But Imaginary Friend, I had read The Perks of Being a Wallflower when I was a teenager, which is the right time to read The Perks of Being a Wallflower. So I had loved it. I still have my copy of that book. And Stephen Chbosky had not published another book since. And although this one is a big, fat thriller / horror novel, I thought, I want to read something else by him. And then didn't want to read a thriller / horror book that was that long, especially after I started getting very mixed feedback about it. So ultimately, I unhauled it. I had not read it, as was also the case with The Water Dancer and Nothing to See Here. So yes, this is a bloodbath. Then there's Find Me by Andre Aciman. Now, I'm a huge fan of Call Me By Your Name, and this is a sequel to that book. But immediately when it was published, people started reading it and absolutely hating it. So I started feeling like, oh, this isn't good. I don't know. I decided I'm going to try it for myself. And I read, I think, 2 or 3 chapters and was like, this is awful. So I decided, no, I'm not going to do this to myself. I will just leave Call Me By Your Name the way it was, not mess with the memory of that book. And I banished it from the house like a demon. So I am counting it as something that I read because I did make an effort, but I hated it. And this sounds kind of mean. I think Andre Aciman is sort of like a one-hit wonder for me because I love Call Me By Your Name. Anything else I have attempted to read by him, I have viscerally disliked. So I feel at this point like not worth trying anymore. Then there was A Ladder to the Sky by John Boyne. I read this book and I absolutely hated it. The only thing that got me to finish it was that I was reading it with Sean Breed's books and we were laughing at it, and kind of that made the experience fun. But also, in the years since, John Boyne has revealed himself to be a monster of a human being, so very happy not to have this book in my library anymore. Then, a book that I actually have, Duck's Newbury Port by Lucy Ellmann. This had been on the long list for the Booker Prize. It was on the short list for the Booker Prize. And I really wanted to read it at the time. Somehow, I managed to get through the year after October 2019 without having read it. And once that year passed, it feels like the likelihood that I end up getting to this is going down exponentially. But I still want to read it. And I'm still holding on to it. And maybe in another 2 to 4 years, if I haven't read it, I'll have to sit down and have a real think about whether or not I'm going to read it. But I would still like to. So we'll see if and when that ever happens. Then the final book in this entire book haul revisit is Belonging, A German Reckons with History and Home by Nora Krug. This is a graphic novel. I did read that book and I liked it. I didn't love it. So ultimately I felt fine unhauling it and taking it into my local used bookstore to trade for credit. So 8 books were in my October of 2019 book haul, which, and I will say a lot of my 2019 book hauls are not very successful because I think it was my first year on BookTube and I got excited about all the things. And, there had been several years period before that where, money was really tight. So I wasn't able to buy books. So not only was I on BookTube for the first time, but I also started to have spending money on books for the first time in a while. So I kind of went crazy. And not a lot of that was successful. So I've read 3 out of the 8 books from October of 2019. That is 38%. Really going to be difficult to get to 100. 100% would be kind of impossible because I don't want to pick up Imaginary Friend just to pick on one of those books. I unhauled 6 out of the 8. 6 out of the 8. That is 75% of my October of 2019 book haul. That's insane. But only 3 of those were books that I had not read yet. So that's 38%. But that is my watch out criteria. And October 2019 was not good for that. However, looking at the 3 books that I read all of them in print. So not that I care about whether or not I end up listening to something on audio, but I don't get any ticks in that regard. So let's look at how I did overall in my October book hauls, in these 6 book hauls that we are revisiting. Overall, I brought 35 books into my library over these 6 Octobers. I have read 18 of those books. That is 51%. Now, my sort of unofficial guidance for myself is that I would like my book hauls to be at or above 50%. I don't feel like I need to read all of the books. As I said, some of these are sort of aspirational. There are books that I didn't intend to read like right away. So 51% is good. That's where I want to be with that. I did end up unhauling 11 of the 35 books, and that is 31%. My watch out criteria ended up being 4 out of the 35 books. I unhauled 4 books that I had not read, and that is 11%. Now, I started keeping track of this watch out criteria earlier in 2025, and I made an arbitrary designation and said I would like the percentage of that criteria to be below 15%. And I went over that in August. It was August. I went over that for the first time. But I noticed after that, like pretty much all of my book haul revisits, I've been floating somewhere just under 15%. So instead of feeling like, oh no, I need to do a lot better, I feel like maybe I should also think about how that was just an arbitrary number I kind of made up. Maybe 15% is unrealistic. I won't really know until I've done this a bunch more times. So I'm going to keep my arbitrary number at 15% and see what happens. But it might change in the future if it turns out that that's an unrealistic goal to hit. And I listened to 4 of the 35 books on audio. That is also 11%, just like the books that I unhauled without reading. So, a bit of a mixed bag in the last 6 Octobers, but a lot of success. And there are, as I said, several book hauls where I feel like I could easily get to 100%. So we'll have to see next year if I've made ground in that regard, or if the books that I bring into my library this month turn out to be a bit of an albatross. Maybe that 51% success rate will go down when I factor in books that I buy this month. We'll find out in a year. And if you have thoughts about the books that I've talked about, or recommendations for a book that you would like to see me read, if you'd have recommendations based on my interest in any of these books, let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I really appreciate your time, and I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.